Today, we are delighted to welcome a poet, editor, translator, and management professional based in Hyderabad. She is acclaimed translator of The Dead Fish, the English translation of Rajkamal Chaudhary's groundbreaking novel Machli Mari Hui. The book earned widespread critical appreciation and was nominated for the WOW Book Awards, shortlisted by Banaras Lit Fest. And it was also translated for the best translated book by Sahitya Aaj Tak. She is also the author of best-selling poetry collection Nostalgia, Crafting a Home Within, which became Amazon's #1 bestseller in Asian literature and received the Maharshi Ved Vyas Award. Her poems and writing have been featured in various literary journals, newspapers, and over 70 anthologies. Viewers, please join me in welcoming the inspiring author Mahua Sen.
Thank you.
Mahua ji, welcome to the show.
Thank you for that warm introduction.
Begin with, just tell us more about yourself and your childhood.
Well, I have lived apart from my biological parents. I grew up in New Delhi since I was just 9. So since then, my life has, unfolded across different cities within India and even beyond that. And looking back, I would say I see every place as, and every transition that, I had shaped the kind of a person that I am today. And always, books were my closest companions during those years. And of course, they offered me that refuge, perspective, and a sense of belonging when I often left, alone and felt untethered. It's not easy to stay away from your parents when you are a child, right? Through books, I think I discovered that, words could hold both solitude as well as connection. So perhaps that is why I have always, felt at home in the world of words. And poetry, stories, these are for me different ways of, kind of listening to life, if I can say so. And my favorite poet Rilke said that the only journey is the journey that is within ourselves. So those words have always stayed with me. So every poem that I read or write and every work of art that I kind of encounter becomes another step on that inward journey, helping me to connect more deeply within myself. And if you ask me if I have reached to my destination, if I have, I have not. The answer would be no, because it's a continuous unfolding. Right. And sometimes I feel that journey itself is a destination and I wouldn't have it any other way. So, yeah.
So, Mahua, you are an editor, translator, author, and also a management professional. So, how do these diverse roles shape you, and how do you balance them?
I think you don't really take out time for things that you're truly, passionate about. They naturally find their way into your life because you simply cannot not do them, so to say. So, writing for me is not a scheduled activity. It is an instinctive response to life. Whether I'm reading, translating, working, or even management projects that comes my way, I'm constantly observing. I'm constantly reflecting and collecting. All kinds of experiences that eventually you can say shape my writing. And of course there are periods when one role demands more attention than the others, but I think I've learned to embrace those kind of shifts instead of chasing that perfect balance. And I think for me it's less about managing equal proportions, and it's more about staying connected, to what gives each role a meaning. And at the same time, it really means a great deal to me to do something that gives me joy. So yeah.
Right. So, tell me something. आपको कब लगा that writing was more than a passion? It was your calling. What age did you feel so?
I think I have always, I mean, as long as I can remember, I have always written. As I said, I was away from my parents. I was in Delhi. I was very young, and initially books came to me. And I cannot tell you an exact time when did I start writing, but I always used to write in my journal, things that I didn't have. I mean, I couldn't share with others. And my journey with writing started with those, journals. Every year I had a journal and I would write everything that I felt about. So I think somewhere my writing journey began there. But yes, later on, eventually, as I grew up, I became a part of the school newspaper team and the magazine team. I was the editor of school magazine, and I used to take part in all kinds of writing activities that used to, happen in school and later on in college and also. So yeah, and also writing, I think, ceased to be a passion the day I realized it was kind of shaping me more than I was shaping it. And I think there comes a moment when words stop being an expression of who we are, and it begins to, become a path towards discovering who we are. So I think writing has become my way of understanding, what do we call existence itself. Yeah. So
So,
that's
you write poetries also, and you do translation work also. So, which is more closer to your heart?
Poetry, no doubt. Poetry came first because emotion seeks expression before they seek, interpretation, if I can put it that way. And poetry comes very naturally to me. And translation, of course, came much, much later. I always say that I'm an accidental translator, But yes, it teaches me that every language carries a unique way of, seeing the world. So I think I'll put it this way, that poetry gave me a voice and translation taught me to listen. And I think between speaking and listening lies the true dialogue of literature. And ever since the translation of Dead Fish, I have translated many short stories and poems and all of that. But especially after, the kind of acclaim Dead Fish has gotten, and my motive was kind of realized because I really wanted to bring Rajkamal Chaudhary's work to the Anglophone readers. So I kind of got that zeal to translate more of his work and other literature, which other authors' works, because it's so important. Otherwise, how would we know or read? I mean, we have. I was asking my sister that, have you which book is your very favorite, and she was like, 100 Years of Solitude. I just asked fleetingly, do you know it's a work of translation? And she was like, what? So this is the thing. I mean, most of the, even if
Hmm.
you ask me my favorite books, I think most of the books that I've read and are my favorites are translated fiction. And the irony is that most of the times we do not even recognize the fact that they are, translated fiction. So I feel translation is extremely, extremely important.
It's
That's how.
important and it's very difficult also. So,
Extremely difficult, yeah. But then,
yeah.
yes,
So,
of
what
course,
inspired
going
you?
back to
Yeah.
your question, poetry comes very naturally to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what inspired you to translate Dead Fish? Like, was there any inspiration behind it, or you just felt so?
It was an accident, yes.
Okay. Can
As
you
I
talk more
said,
about it?
yeah, before, yeah, it was during COVID times. I was just talking to a friend of mine about Hindi Sahitya. I think COVID, in a way, brought us very close to each
Yeah,
other
true.
as well. We started to call people we have never, I mean, we have not spoken for years together. So,
Right.
like that, I was talking to one of my friends, and eventually we started talking about literature. And since he's very, passionate about Hindi Sahitya, he started asking me about Hindi Sahitya and the books I have read in Hindi. And eventually, the conversation dawdled towards Rajkamal Chaudhary, and especially Machli Mari Hui. He asked me whether I had read Machli Mari Hui, and I remembered that back in my graduation days, one of my professors had talked about Machli Mari Hui while teaching us gender studies. So of course I didn't remember the exact story, but I did remember that it was about lesbian identity and all of that. And he was like, you must go back and read the book again. And I remember ordering the book, placing an order for the book then and there. And the day I received the book, I started reading it, and I could not put it down, and even after finishing the book, I had sleepless nights. It had that kind of a potent impact on me. I think some books do not simply ask you to be merely, reading them, but they ask to be lived. So I think Machli Mari Hui in that sense was one such work. And especially if you have read it, its emotional depth and moral complexity lingered with me long after, I finished reading it. And I kind of, felt a sort of urgency to introduce this work to the Anglophone readers. And I, of course, took that leap with a lot of inhibition in my mind. And also, while reading more about Rajkamal Chaudhary's life, I came to know that, he hailed from a place where my father was posted as a medical officer for many years.
Mm.
And eventually, one story, unfolded another. And I almost felt like a, what to say, kind of kismet connection, that I think I have to do it, that kind of an urgency. So, and there was no looking back. Yeah, I started translating.
Okay. So, this book deals about a lot of complex issue and very sensitive issues. So, while translating it, did it emotionally drain you out?
Yes, first of all, yes, it explores themes like lesbian identity. And
Mm.
remember, it was written at a time when even acknowledging something like that was almost blasphemous, let alone writing about it. Of course, reason why it had earned controversies from critics back then. But yes, while translating, I was indeed sensitive to the author's voice, to the theme, of course. And as such, also, I think translation to me is an act of empathy before it is an act of language.
Mm.
And for Dead Fish, every sentence demanded not only linguistic, precision, but emotional fidelity. So I think my responsibility was not merely to preserve meaning, but to preserve the silence, the hesitation, the grief, the hope, and also the invisible, spaces between the words. As we say, language communicates, silence reveals, right? So I think in that sense, my attempt was to stay true to the original voice and handle the silences with empathy and fidelity. I don't think I tried to iron out the rough edges of the original text. I had a long discussion with my editor time and again, because there were times when, Rajkamal Chaudhary doesn't write in linear tense. Sometimes it goes dawdles between future
Mm.
and the present tense, then goes back to
Mm.
uh, past tense and comes back, that kind of. And then I had a long discussion with my editor about it. I wanted to keep it that way. And at some point she said that it won't, I mean, we can iron the rough edges if we want to make it easier for the Anglophone readers. And I was dead against that, because I felt that even we do not think in linear terms, right? Imagination is also not linear. So are our expression, I mean, experiences. And I thought that that has been kept very consciously because of the chaos that each and every character, it's not an easy read. It's a very difficult read, right? Each and every character goes through a lot of mental chaos and so on. So I have tried to be, very loyal to the author in that sense. And yeah, it was very unsettling because of the theme, of course. And though the journey was arduous, it's truly fulfilling to see how people have, they have been showering love and appreciation for the book, especially the fact that the book has opened the trapdoor to discussions
Mm.
around Rajkamal Chaudhary's works among our Anglophone readers. It's extremely humbling, really. That exactly was my motive, right? So, yeah, it's
So,
extremely.
any challenges you faced while translating it, or any particularly memorable incident you remember?
I think the most challenging passages were often the quietest ones. We say grief rarely speaks aloud, right? And neither
Right.
should translation. So,
Right.
as I mentioned, some sentences required days of reflection because I wasn't searching for equivalent words. I was perhaps, searching for equivalent emotions. So, those moments reminded me that translation is as much, you know, contemplation as craftsmanship. Of course, you need craftsmanship, but it's more about, I think, contemplation. So, yes, there were many such moments, and I would say many nights. There are, a lot of sentences, I mean, especially words, which I did not know how to translate and then didn't want to keep it that way. So, it really took me a lot of time because I think I lived with the characters. I felt like that. Sometimes I feel like I'm the biological mother of this book. I not even a single time did I feel that I was, translating somebody else's work. I felt that because I was so engrossed with each and every character of the book.
I'm
I
sure.
I almost felt like living with them, and I don't know. I mean, those 2 3 years took a lot of my personal life away because not that I regret about it, but I was extremely engrossed in this project, yeah, in this story. I was living with Shireen and Priya and Nirmal Padmavat, and I felt that way. I've never felt this before. Yeah, that was new to me.
Okay. So this book has received a lot of widespread acclamation and you've received awards. How do you feel about that? कैसा लगता है आपको?
Course, it's extremely humbling, and yeah, recognition is gratifying because it tells us that our work has reached people, and they have in some sense resonated with it. But yeah, every heartfelt message from a reader reminds me that literature ultimately belongs not to the writer but to those who find themselves within it. And the book has been widely reviewed. The book will turn one this August, but reviews are still pouring in, and I feel deeply grateful about it. People are reading it, appreciating it, gifting it to their friends, and I'm getting all kinds of emails from strangers, and it really feels great about it across the globe, not only in India. So
Okay.
yeah, so really
So
grateful about
tell
that.
me something in your opinion, like what does translation play a role in bringing the literature to a wider audience?
I think, as I was telling you earlier, it's one of humanity's quietest form of compassion. It needs a
Right.
lot of empathy. It allows one culture to dream in another language, if I can put it that way. And every translated work, expands not only literature but also empathy. Someone said that the language of Europe is translation, and I think I would tweak it. I would go a little further and say that the language of humanity is translation, because every genuine conversation begins with the willingness to understand one another, right?
Right.
And of course, in a broader sense, translation gives us a peek into different languages, cultural nuances, and so on, evoking a sense of community in us. Because we learn that despite of our differences, diversity, and so on, we are one. We are one through our joys and sorrows. So, yes.
So now we'll move on to your poetry collection. So tell us more about your collection, Nostalgia, Crafting a Home. What inspired you to write that?
Oh, this book is right in front of me. It's very close to my heart. As I told you, I parted with my home and my biological parents when I was just 9. And I always felt a sense of homelessness, displacement, and a sense of big unmood, so to say. And this collection grew from that simple yet profound question: what is home when everything around us changes, right? And although over time I realized that memory is less about returning to the past and more about understanding the present. The poems in this book talks about that, complexity, or whatever you call it: memory, identity, healing, home, and homelessness.
Mm.
What is home? I mean, for a mother, for a woman, I would say, when we are in our mother's home, then we go to our husbands, and then suddenly the home that we spend most of our lives becomes from home to mother's home, so there's always that sense of homelessness, especially for a woman, I would say. So home ultimately is not where we live. I think it is where we become whole, right? It's about emotions. So yes, it's more about soul than soil, if I can put
So
it.
the title itself is very beautiful,
Mm.
Crafting a Home. So what does that mean? personally mean to you?
To me, it means cultivating an inner space that remains undisturbed by the world's constant movement. We spend so much of our lives searching for belonging outside ourselves, only to discover that the deepest refuge has always existed within. So crafting that inner home requires acceptance, it requires forgiveness, it requires gratitude and the courage to embrace, imperfection, not only perfection. So I think that is very important. And I would not take away the credit of the title because this title was suggested by my publisher. So we were playing with different titles, and I think he suggested me that this fits well. And this phrase is from one of my poems in the book. So when he suggested me this, I was like, wow, it sums up the entire collection so beautifully. So yes.
So, your poetry collection became the Amazon bestseller. What was your reaction? I mean, how did you feel?
Of course, it came as a surprise to me. First of all, I never thought of publishing this book. I have always written poems. I have written poems ever since a very tender age, and there are many poems snoozing, even right now, snoozing in my notebooks, in my laptop, and so on. And at one point in time, my friends, family, everybody said you should archive at least some of your poems. And then what I did, as I told you, that my childhood, my ancestral home, they're very close to my heart, and I think I've never left my childhood. So I
Right.
thought of, since I stayed away from my parents all my life, I have a
Hmm.
very it's untethered, I would say, my memories of my childhood. So I thought of coming out with a collection that talks about that, about memory and nostalgia. And this book, what was your question? I digressed completely.
I mean,
Sorry.
I also got so engrossed listening to you. So it's okay. So
Oh,
we'll
you
do
asked,
the book
yeah, how
reading, yeah,
did you feel about the
about the
Amazon
being the
bestseller?
Amazon
Yeah, yeah,
bestseller.
yeah. So yeah, it came as a surprise. I published this book not because I wanted, this to become a bestseller or something.
Yeah.
I published because I thought that I should archive at least the poems because
Mhm.
I keep on losing my poems. So I thought I'll collate and I'll bring out a book so that it'll be archived, sort of. So, but then the kind of within the first week, I got to know from my publisher that the first print run was out. So, of course, my publisher was ecstatic and it came as a very pleasant surprise to me. Um, of course, I didn't anticipate it. I felt very grateful, but also reflective because success is meaningful only when it deepens one's sense of
Absolutely.
responsibility.
Absolutely.
I feel a bestseller is a milestone, not a destination. And what matters most is knowing that the poems have, traveled into the lives of strangers and perhaps
Yeah, that
then feel a
matters.
little less alone. And that gives a sense of fulfillment, which is really, really precious.
Actually. So we'll read a couple of poems in the end. But tell me something. Which of the poems is the close? I'm sure all the poems are very close to your heart. But any particular poem which is very very close to your heart?
There's a poem on my grandma. She was an integral part of my childhood.
That we'll definitely read out. You'll read her.
Yeah, I'm what I am because of her, I would say. So
Right.
that poem is the closest to my heart. But that said, again, as you said, being a mother to each of my poems, I cannot pick a favorite among
But
my
yeah.
children. So every time I revisit each poem, I discover meanings that I had not consciously placed there. And I think that perhaps is the mystery of poetry. It often knows the poet better than the poet knows themselves, I guess.
Right.
So,
So, Moa, tell me something. Your work has appeared in numerous journals and literary magazines. How does that shape you more as a writer?
every publication reminds me that, writing is not a solitary act, but a conversation across generations, cultures, geographies. And each editor I've worked with, each reader and fellow writer becomes a part of that conversation, that journey. And literature teaches us humility, right? Because every new work begins with the realization that we are always, apprentices before language. We can never go beyond that. And that keeps us grounded in that sense. Yeah.
So, you travel, do you travel a lot?
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
so do you get inspiration from your poems by
Uh,
traveling or by reading? Where do you draw inspiration for your poems
Um,
from?
I think I don't search for inspiration, Rashmi, to tell you the truth. I
Yeah.
cultivate attention. I think every poet is extremely observant.
Mhm.
That's what I feel. Even a falling leaf, a forgotten photograph, or a passing stranger, maybe a forgotten conversation, unfinished conversation. I
Right.
think everything carries poetry if we learn to observe.
Right.
I also write from my personal experiences, as I said. But yeah, my ancestral home, my grandparents, my childhood,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
there's even my book, as I said, talks about that. And that said, even a safety pin can nudge me to write a poem. Even a, torn newspaper can, nudge me to write something about it.
Right.
So yeah, I it's very erratic. I get inspiration from everything that's around me. Yeah, not only experiences but things around me. Yeah,
Right. So you've been staying in Hyderabad for long?
yeah. It's been quite long, but in
So
between,
how do you find that city, and how does, I mean, has it shaped your way of writing, way of thinking?
yeah, I think very much because Hyderabad is a city where languages, histories, and cultures coexist effortlessly, I would say.
Right.
And living here has reinforced my belief that diversity is not merely something to celebrate, it is something to learn from. And every city, I think, leaves its rhythm in the people who inhabit it. And every writer eventually begins to write in that kind of rhythm. So, yeah,
So tell me more. You're a poet and a translator. So writing poetry definitely comes from the heart, and
yes,
translating requires a lot of research.
yes.
Which do you find more challenging, and why?
Again, poetry is synonymous with breathing to me. It comes
Yeah.
very naturally, as I said. Sometimes I write verses within minutes, between my chores, between my commute to a place. So, in that sense, poetry asked me to discover my own voice, I would say. And translation asked me to surrender to it. So, that surrender perhaps. Is of course difficult. The greater challenge lies in the fact that it requires a lot of humility, right? A
Hmm.
translator succeeds not only by being heard but by allowing another voice to resonate with equal authenticity. You
Right.
cannot even think of overshadowing the author's voice. You cannot
Hmm.
overshadow it with your own voice. So I'm
Right.
very conscious about that fact. I never want to if you read my short stories, poetry, and if you read my translation, there's no similarity between the two because I keep that segregation. I do not let my voice speak when I'm translating it. I try to be as authentic as possible to the original, author. But of course, poetry, and when I'm writing poetry, it comes very naturally to me, as I said, and yeah, it talks about my lived experiences and memory
Right.
and all of that, everything that affects me in some sense.
So what does a typical writing day look like to you? How do you start? And
There is no typical writing day as such. My
okay.
writing schedule is very, very erratic in that sense.
Okay.
But yes, when I do, I begin with silence. Before writing, I gather my thoughts. Before, expressing, I try to absorb. So sometimes I also write between, as I said, my daily errands and daily chores and so on. So some days I produce many pages, other days, maybe few sentences. There are times I don't write for days. And when I write, I have, when I'm in that momentum, I write pages after pages, for days together, nights together. That's my time to write. So yeah, I have learned not to measure a writing day by quantity, but by the depth of
Yeah.
attention, it demands. So,
Right. So which poets have deeply inspired you? Any particular poet you look up to, or have drawn inspiration from their work?
I have deeply been influenced by Rabindranath Tagore
I'm sure.
and Rilke. Pablo Neruda, Sylvia Plath, T.S. Eliot, and several contemporary Indian voices as well.
Right.
But I think what unites them is not the style, but their sincerity. I think great literature never tries to impress; it simply reveals, and I like to read that kind of literature. Yeah.
Right.
So,
So, any advice to young poets? Who want to explore poetry and translation both?
um, I'm not in a position to really give, preach, so to say. But yes, I would,
Yeah,
of
your
course,
words, your
that
thoughts.
read beyond comfort, beyond language, beyond certainty. Learn to appreciate the silence as much as words. That's
Right.
really important. I think translation teaches you humility, poetry teaches you vulnerability, and I would say humility because you cannot, as I said, overshadow the original text, right? And
Right.
vulnerability because poetry, to me, is more about experience and empathy. So
Right.
honestly, every literary journey ultimately leads us back to ourselves. And for people who want to write, I would, of course, say time and again that read, translation, poetry, short stories, all kinds of books that you can, read. And for
Right.
especially mothers who want their children to read, my friends keep asking me because my children are too fond of reading. So I have never inculcated, so to say, the habit of reading in them. It came naturally to them. But then
Right.
my friends keep asking me how to inculcate the habit of reading in children because
Mm-hmm.
they're so engrossed with their tablets and phone
Mm-hmm.
and screen. So I just tell them to give them books on a platter. It should be a buffet for them, not an a la carte. Give them, do not force them to read only classics. Sometimes, as
Right.
mothers, we impose books on our children. I think we shouldn't do that. We should give them many kinds of book and let them pick and choose. Every child would, like a particular kind of book.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
important. Let them, once the interest is picked, I think eventually you can just suggest them to read. But yeah, that's very important that as mothers, as caregivers of children, we encourage them. And of course we can lead by example. We can it's not only about telling them to read, but reading
Mm.
with them, reading to them if the child is very young, or set a habit of reading and read together. I do that with my little one, and it's really rewarding. So we have our reading times, mother daughter reading time, so
Yeah.
we do that. So I think that's important. Yeah.
Okay, so now, in this digital era, I think reading has really gone down a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you also grew up reading Enid Blyton's,
Yes,
and
of course,
yeah,
Amos
they were
Pai
my
and all
favorite.
of that.
So,
Nancy Drew.
yeah, that's you do. Really, we love that. So tell
Mm.
me something like digital reading or hard copy, which do you feel
For
that
me, it's always hard copy
for
because
me also, yes,
I love
definitely.
the feel of book. I love the
Feel and the
smell
smell
of
of the
book.
pages, right?
And I'm very happy that my children also love the physical
Yeah,
copy. Especially my younger one is crazy for books. I mean, her
yeah.
birthday is approaching, and all she wants is books and books. So yeah, uh, I think physical book can never ever
Definitely,
replace.
definitely. In fact, I remembered I was 8 when I started reading, and I told my dad, I said, whatever money you want to spend on my birthday, please buy me books.
Yeah,
He
my
just
daughter
laughed.
says the
He
same.
said, I'll buy you books also, and you celebrate your birthday also. I mean,
How
he
nice.
really encouraged me. So
Yeah,
I've
I
grown
know.
up with that.
I think parents play a great deal in
Yeah,
shaping this habit. Yeah,
definitely.
and I think yeah, digital stuffs books can never replace hard
Yeah.
copies.
So do you plan to write in Bengali language also? And do you plan to translate your own books, your poetry books?
I don't write in Bengali. I've never tried
Yeah,
that, but
that's what
I
I'm saying, huh?
don't know
So
in
do you want
future
to?
if I would ever do that. I got a project recently from. I'm not revealing the entire detail, but
Yeah.
they're collating. They're writing poetry for young children in
Hmm.
all the languages that we have in India, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
government project. So,
Hmm.
and they have nudged me and kind of convinced me, though I was not taking it up, but they have convinced me to write poetry in Bengali. So this would be my first attempt in writing Bengali.
Wow.
I have translated Bengali poems before,
Hmm.
my favorite authors, but then, I mean, poets, but then I've never written, so to say. But this
Okay.
is the first time I'm, taking that leap. So let's see how it goes.
Okay. So can you read out a few poems from your book?
Yeah, sure.
You can read a couple of them, two, three.
Okay, I'll do that. So the first poem is called The Name Consumed. We are so possessed by our name sometimes. So this is called The Name Consumed. They tell me my name was selected when I clung to the maternal tether. A cluster of letters strung together, Mahua etched on a parchment, sewn into the veins of the rosy swaddle that cocooned me. A symbolic pact inked between myself and the society. Does my name validate my singular being? Or is it but a mere convenience? Does my name bear the burdens I bear? The concealed anguish? The affection I harbor? Does my name etch an image of me in another's mind? Does it prescribe the character I must pursue? By chance, I etched my name on a slate and explored permutations with its letters, seeking transformation into something new with the hope of a rebirth. Possible, perhaps? Can a name render me complete? Can it alter one's identity? Once I clutched my name within my palm, cradling and caressing each ridge and crevice then I relinquished it. Suddenly, a gust of wind arose and my name took a flight. What if I bore no name? What if I possessed numerous appellations? What if you could address me by any name? Does my name delineate my essence? Would I be an altered self with an alternate name? Would your affection wane? Isn't it the manner in which you utter my name, caressing each curve of the syllable, tracing your fingers along its spine, my name, born from your core, like the melody of rain upon arid soil, alters the entire essence? Then, then tell me, why are we consumer of names? So,
Beautiful. So apt. I mean, name. Like for us, we have Daknam also,
yes,
and
yes.
so it's
Even
really
I have a
beautiful.
very weird duck name, by the way.
So, please read out that poem you wrote about your grandmother.
Okay, sure. If you can see, there's a picture of
Yeah.
me with my granny. Grandmother. It's a sonnet, actually.
Okay.
I still hear the faint chime of my grandma's bangles as they whisper secrets in their rhythmic dance. A river's gentle swish, a memory that entangles. Childhood treasures amassed in timeless expanse. Her visage as the full moon, radiant and small, crisscrossed by the etchings of time's tender lore. Her eyes, deep pools of wisdom, enthralled us all, unraveling sagas of Esther Judah and tales of yore. I'm ensnared in the gossamer threads of yesteryears, yearning for tales spun with suspense forever prime. In the labyrinth of days where simple joys were our dearest cheers, her lap, a sanctuary from life's tempest climb. Basking in the warm hues of nostalgia's tender tears, chasing memories like the cherished verses of a timeless rhyme. That's my grandmother for you.
Beautiful. So we have time for one more poem. Any poem which is more close to your heart?
Oh, okay. It's very difficult, as I told you, to
I
pick
know, to
your
pick and
favorite
choose.
child.
Yeah.
I just want to pick a small poem because these are mostly prose poems, so they
Yeah.
are long
Right.
ones. So yeah,
That's okay.
that's okay. Then I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
read about my grandfather. It's a prose poem, but
Yeah. Yeah.
bit long.
No worries.
He
You
is
can.
my Yeah, he was my grandfather. Yeah, he was extremely handsome, by the way. Grandfather. In my heart, I hold the belief that the ones we love never truly depart, even after they have transcended the boundaries of mortal existence. I like to envision a realm of serenity and peace where they find respite, liberated from the travails of life. A place where they harmonize with the ever turning wheel of temporality, embracing the afterlife in all its intricate splendor. This, perhaps, is my way of coping, a balm for the wounds of grief to mitigate the ache that resides within. But there are moments when the ache is undeniable and the absence of my grandfather weighs heavily on my heart. It's a physical pain, an excruciating throb that renders me motionless. The more I try to push memories away, the more relentlessly they return like boomerangs, leaving me with an insatiable yearning to hold them close to my chest. Despite the pain they carry, these memories offer a tender solace. During those days of yore, my sister and I would rouse ourselves at the break of dawn to the crowing of roosters. With sleepy yawns, stretching limbs, and rubbed eyes, we would make our way to the Lal veranda, the vast porch of our home. There we would perch ourselves upon the wooden chowki, listening to Dada's Murphy radio as it serenaded us with Rabindra Sangeet. At times, we would rush outside, toothbrushes in hand, to observe the housemaids tending to the cattle. We even had elephants and horses as pets alongside the cows, a scene straight out of a fairy tale. I delighted in watching them prepare hay for the cattle, and some would refill the cemented water troughs. It was mesmerizing for my 4-year-old self. So people feel that it's just a story, but yes, we
It's
did
not, it's not. I
we
found
did
it so
have horses
nostalgic.
and and
I
we
was,
did have horses and elephants as pets when we were young. My earliest lessons in benevolence were gleaned from the way my grandparents extended their helping hand to our housemaids and others in need. None of them had to worry about their daughters' marriages or the renovation of their thatched huts. Their cramped abodes, nestled closely together, were transformed and rejuvenated, often with the addition of plots to build their homes if they did not possess one already. In return, my grandparents earned an abundance of respect, admiration, love, and more. I recall the evenings when the fragrance of wood smoke wafted through the air. Kerosene lamps were placed in every room except for my grandfather's chamber. Instead, he would light a single candle each evening. To this day, I cannot decipher whether he favored the elliptical flame, loathed the scent of kerosene, or simply preferred a softer light to the brighter alternatives. My sister and I would often gather in his room during those evenings, drawn by the allure of his treasure trove of stories. These were not tales of make believe, but rather vivid recollections from his youth, his days in medical college, his experiences as a traveler, his encounters with renowned freedom fighters, and his memories intertwined with those events. Enthralled, engrossed, we would be transported to another realm through the tapestry of his narratives. The memories of my childhood. The memories of my childhood collecting shuli flowers in woven baskets with my grandpa and my sister reside in the deepest recess of my soul. We would string them into garlands to offer to Goddess Durga during Pujo festivities. Among these cherished memories, one in particular pierces my chest with a poignant ache. My grandpa would entrust me with a bundle of yellow postcards, each bearing his address, and ask me to write him letters. Alongside these postcards, he would provide numerous essentials each time I returned to the hostel. He too wrote me letters regularly. In his missives, he would invariably urge me to take care of my health and to follow my heart. despite the prevailing adage that emphasizes the importance of lekha pora kore je gari ghoda chole she. He who studies travels in carriages and cars. Sometimes the evening carries a penumbra of joy within its bosom, akin to a mother's promise to her child, a treat to quell the little one's restlessness. I nurture this fragment of existence and I navigate through another day, slicing through the tethers of what was, finding solace in life's simple pleasures. At times, it feels just right to breathe and to be. As I pen these words, my vision is blurred and my voice quivers. Thank you.
Beautiful. You know, transported me back to my childhood because I have grown up in Kolkata. So it's
Okay.
like, yeah, it's absolutely जो आपने लिखा है really was there. So very beautifully
I'm
written.
glad you could resonate.
Yeah, I could. So मन तो नहीं है. I wish I could keep reading, but definitely I'll read from your book.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, two questions. One, can you describe your life in one journey, your poetic, in one sentence?
My literary journey is an ongoing conversation between silence and language, where I think every poem and every translation brings me a little closer to understanding what it means to be human.
Right.
Yeah.
And one last, not question, your thoughts about Zena family.
Oh, amazing. You're doing an amazing work. And I just told you offline as well that
Yeah.
thank you for doing so much to, for literature lovers, and keep doing the great work that you are doing. And thanks for making me a part of your Zena family and wishing you all the very best.
We are honored. We are honored. And please do
Congratulations on
share
this.
your views with your other author friends so that they can also become a part of this.
Definitely, I would do that. Yeah.
So
It's a
with that,
blessing to be a part of such a brilliant,
thank you.
family.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with that, we'll wish you all the best for your future and looking
Thank
forward
you.
to more of your books.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. It was wonderful talking to you.
Same here. Same here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi.